and welcome to the Romance Track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about Poolside Romance, all those steamy summer stories where people fall in love and true love wins. But before we launch into that wonderful topic, let's let our fantastic panelists introduce themselves, starting with Layla.
Hey everybody, I'm Layla Reyne. I write LGBTQ, romantic suspense, and romance.
Okay, Jeannie.
Hey everybody, I'm Jeanne Adams. I write urban fantasy, paranormal romantic suspense, and space adventure with my friend Nancy Northcott.
Okay, Ariel.
Hey, I'm Ariel Dawn, and I write mostly paranormal romance, reverse harem, why choose, monster romance, and urban fantasy. But I also dabble in other genres as well, such as contemporary and sci-fi romance and cozy. So
Sounds good. Nancy?
I write historical fantasy with and without strong romantic elements. I also write science fiction adventure, as Jeannie said, with her. And I publish several different subgenres of romance, including male-female paranormal romance and male-female romantic suspense.
Okay, and I'm Gail Z. Martin, and Morgan Brice is Morgan. I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance, and romance even manages to sneak in now and again around the edges on my urban fantasy and steampunk written as Gail Z. Martin. So, as I promised the panelists, none of the books you talk about tonight have to have a pool in them. But if you do have a pool or a beach where, you know, the protagonists are lounging, soaking up the sun, and ogling all those other people, yes, by all means, bring that up. But Layla, what do you think attracts us to summer romances in particular?
I mean, I think there is an element of vacation, right? Being out, being kind of somewhere different, exploring something different perhaps in the summer. At least I think that's most Americans' viewpoint, because that's usually when we weren't in school. And so there's some aspect of that. I know this year is the Olympics, I think, so that has some aspect of being summery as well when those big events happen, right? And so swimmers, which I've got some of those, in stories, I think those are the kinds of things that sometimes pop to mind when you think about summer romance. And it's, you know, hot and little clothing usually as a result, or less clothing.
Always lovely.
Trying to keep my large dog happy while we're talking. So, Jeannie, how about you?
Oh gosh, so many wonderful reasons that summer is a good time for romance. As Layla says, you know, clothing optional. I'm a cold weather person, and hot weather gets me. So I'm like, I'd rather stay inside and read about everybody else having fun at the beach because I'm a burn and peel girl. But I think a lot of it is sort of the, you know, it's like the start to the movie or the play Grease. It's like summer romance, right? It's like you're kind of out of your regular routine. You're not doing the 9 to 5, or you're not doing school or whatever. Or even if you are, you've got that 1 week where you don't have to be that person, right? And I think whether we find it in our romance or we find it in ourselves, it's just that fun escapist thing. And sometimes it's every summer we go to the pool, and these are, you know, you have the whole, we grew up with these people and suddenly they're different people. And I like that too.
Or suddenly the people you grew up with don't look like they did last summer, and that's a good difference.
Yes.
Ariel, how about you?
I think for me, one of the things that definitely kind of attracts me more to like a summer romance, it kind of already was said that whole summer vacation vibe, or that camp away vibe, where you can just kind of like let the guard down and let, you know, yourself shine or be somebody else. But a lot of times when I think about beach reads, a lot of times I think about, you know, very suspenseful or very like steamy type things that you're reading on the beach while you're in your bikini, you know, like, so it's the heat of summer, but it's also the heat of the romance. I feel like the two of those things collide and they come together very nicely.
How about you, Nancy?
Well, I agree with everything that everybody has said. And I'd also like to add that there are a lot of festivals in the summer. watermelon festivals, 4th of July parades, things people come back to their hometowns for, maybe and they run into people, and that gives you a friends to lovers or a second chance at love romance. And also, I think of poolside romance as romance that's not going to demand too much of me. It's going to have a happy ending. It might be suspenseful. There might be some danger. I'm always, I'm all in favor of an explosion in my romances, but it's not dark and grim. Even the element of danger is not as dark as it is in some of the books, which I enjoy reading a lot, but that's not what I think of as a poolside romance.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I want a happy ending in everything that I read. That really is part of what makes something technically a romance, is a happily ever after or happily for now. But if I'm reading on vacation, I want absolute whipped cream fluff. I want it sweet and gooey and fluffy and no heavy lifting, because my brain is also on vacation and it deserves, not to be taxed. So, let's see some attractive people in small swimsuits and plenty of suntan lotion, meeting the loves of their lives and getting it on. Friction, all that sweet friction. And that just goes with summer and everything else you've said about, there's an element of fantasy. I grew up watching Fantasy Island. But the idea that when you're on vacation, you can be a little different than the person you are at home. Maybe not as dutiful, maybe not as responsible. Maybe you can try on a little bit of a difference and see how it fits you. And that opens up all kinds of story possibilities when people are out of their element, but also open to a little experimenting. So what's your favorite summer vacation, Layla?
You mean just like going somewhere? Like, yeah.
Yes, in real life.
In real life.
When you actually leave your computer.
You mean you can do that?
It's like, really?
It's a rumor. I've heard it. I'm asking to test this out.
I would say two different things. Generally the beach. Grew up as a beach baby. I am also a burn and peel girl. So it's more just I'm a Pisces. I want the water. So I'm okay to sit on the patio and hear the waves. I don't need to go down there to the sandy part. And I'm a-okay with that. Here we go to Oak Island all the time. That's kind of like our place. And then the other thing that we tend to do a lot in the summer are concerts, and go places as a result of concerts. Like we were in California, we were big Pearl Jam fans. And so we tracked them, we'd go from San Francisco to LA to San Diego shows and do the road trip. And then this year now that we're on the East Coast, we're doing New York, Philly, and Baltimore, right at the end of the summer. And so like, it's a fun summer trip. And just to be able to go and enjoy music and see your favorite band, and also, go to some cool places and eat good food. So
all the food. Yeah.
all
Jeannie?
Well, for me growing up, it was always going to the lake in the North Carolina mountains, specifically Lake Lure. And to me, that was like the best of both worlds, because you had lots and lots of water, but you didn't have the sand that got in all the inconvenient places. And there were lots of trees with the water. So my burn and peel tendencies didn't tend to be so prevalent. And, there's also water skiing and, doing the ski-doos and all that sort of thing. And just literally lying around on an inner tube in the water, doing nothing, which is just glorious and really underrated as a vacation activity. Mm-hmm. And then I'm sort of with Layla, but it's also it's more localized in the sense of weekend kind of things. I live in the DC area, so there are concerts in the park, and there's Wolf Trap, and there's 4th of July concert on the mall, all those sorts of things. So if it's not too horribly sweaty, you can go do that, and it's a lot of fun. And spread out the blanket, bring the bottle of wine, the charcuterie board, just have a good old time. course, you know, as Gail and I've discussed many times, growing up, it was also, let's go visit family. Not my favorite activity, but a frequent one, which, as Nancy
Yeah.
said, is also a great lead-in in terms of stories, because, you know, the obligatory family visit for the 4th of July picnic could turn up some interesting things.
This is true. Ariel?
For me, I'm definitely a beach goer. My husband is a big beach goer. Growing up, it was North Carolina's, going down to the Outer Banks, 'cause it's like the popular Pittsburgh thing, right? Like everybody goes to the Outer Banks. But I also really love Florida. In the last 10 years, I want to say at least, like my husband and I have started going down there, and he just loves the palm trees. But for me personally, one of my more favorite spots to vacation, I don't even know if you would call it a vacation, maybe like a weekend trip, is Hot Springs, Virginia, because it's just like so, like it's in the Allegheny Mountains, and it's just like it's quiet, it's peaceful. You've got the 86-degree water hot springs. It stays that way like all year round. It is a magical place. It's definitely one of my favorite places to go. But I do a lot of weekend stuff too, with my best friends. Like a lot of times, even not necessarily just during the summer, but we'll just go to different places, different things. I think like last year I did a convention out in Connecticut, and we took a road trip to Salem, and it was in the summer. So if you've never experienced Salem in the summer, it's a vibe. It's totally cool.
Yeah.
So just stuff like that.
Okay, Nancy.
We also like the North Carolina Outer Banks, but we used to spend a lot more time on the beach. But the last couple of times we went to the Outer Banks, the heat index was 105. My sunscreen was running down my face in white rivulets. And it's kind of like, you know what? This is not fun. But the good thing about the Outer Banks is you have the North Carolina Aquarium, you have Fort Raleigh. The Manteo is a lovely small town, and there's a nice little bookshop there. And so we ended up spending a fair amount of our time reading on the balcony of our motel room with a nice view of the ocean that did not involve, you know, running sunscreen. And one day there were jellyfish in the water, which would have been a pretty much of a buzzkill anyway. But we tend to go more with the beach. I like the mountains a lot, but I'm not a hiker, and that's kind of cuts down on what there is to do in the mountains. And really, any place that's got interesting museums and a historic district I'm up for that too.
Yeah, I have heavily mined all the places I've vacationed in my life for the locations of all of my romance books. Our beach of choice is Myrtle Beach, because I know some people say that Ocean Boulevard is ticky-tacky, but that's what I love about it. It isn't all those other things that the less ticky-tacky beaches are. It is just, it gloriously embraces itself with the Ripley's Believe It or Not, and the fun houses and the arcades. And I just love that. And so that shows up in one of the series. I grew up going camping in the Adirondack Mountains in New York. I am not a hiker either. I was the one at camp reading a book, swatting the, bird-sized mosquitoes. But it was still beautiful. So, and I've discovered Cape May, New Jersey, when our daughter decided to get married there. So that shows up now. No life experience should not be mined and retread with the books. I love the beach. I burn, so I get the biggest beach umbrella we can, slather with the highest SPF sunscreen, and I am curled up in a little ball under towels in the shade. My husband's out there getting bronzed, but that I turn an unattractive shade of pink. So I love the ocean. I love running into the ocean. I love, hiding under the beach umbrella, going out for a good meal afterwards. But I am overdue for a little time at the ocean myself. But so it just seemed natural to take the places I love to go and set romances there, because why not? So what do you think is the most romantic location for a book or for in real life? If you could pick a location, What do you think is the most romantic? Layla?
I think it
And
totally
what
depends.
makes it that way? Hmm?
I think it totally depends on the characters, right? Like, I have one. So, I mean, I love Oak Island, I love Southport, and Hanover is my fake town that's basically about that is that, right? That features in a couple books. And so, for the trio of, college sweethearts that come back together because, one's a cop, one's FBI, they have to solve a case. It's like this small town thing. It makes sense. It's super romantic for them, right? Would I necessarily put my assassins from Fog City there? No, San Francisco is more their speed, the sexiness of the hills, the fogginess, the mystery, because that's what makes them sexy and romantic. So I think so much of it just depends on the characters and the story, because anything can be romantic. It doesn't necessarily have to be the place with the wildflowers. Like Marsh, my character in Perfect Play, loves bougainvillea. So like the ranch at home in Texas is romantic to him because it's there. San Diego's equally romantic because it's just everywhere there, right? So it's more about what it means to the character for me.
Okay, Jeannie?
Oh my gosh. I have to agree with Layla. I think it's really more character driven in the sense of what is romantic to them. I find sort of a lot of old Southern cities very romantic, from Charleston and Savannah to Myrtle Beach. I love Myrtle Beach. I love all the coastal Outer Banks cities for that kind of thing. Nancy's series is set in the Okefenokee, which is an amazing location. Yours, Gail, both Fox Hollow and the one set in Myrtle Beach, just those are wonderful romantic settings because you make them that way. And I think
I
for
left out
me,
the mosquitoes.
yeah, and you can write them out. Those ones that fly in squadrons, you can just write them out. But I think you can make Cleveland sexy if you want to. But I think just for me personally, one of my favorite cities of all time in terms of just romantic and wonderful is Charleston and Savannah. But I found romance in DC, so I can make DC romantic. Damn it.
Ariel?
Kind of agreeing with what everybody else said. Yeah, it's very character driven, obviously. And sometimes just in general, you have that background for your character. So immediately when you have that background, you kind of know like where are they pulling that background from. I have written a book in my own hometown, which is Pittsburgh, which many might not think is romantic, but we've got a big wedding circuit here, and we're all about cookie tables. So I think there is almost a sense, and I've seen a lot of people do this on like on TikTok, on Instagram, on social medias, where it's like romanticizing your life, right? Like your daily life, like finding the romance in the little things inside your own house or in your own city. So I feel like there is a sense of that that kind of falls back to being character driven as well. So you can find that romance in your little tiny suburban town in Pittsburgh, or you can find that romance in Paris, France. It's all about the people that are there and how they see that romance, I guess.
And those cookie tables in Pittsburgh are pretty impressive, just saying.
Thank you.
Nancy?
Well, I also agree that it's character driven, but for me personally, any place that's got a view of water and moonlight has immediate romantic potential. I mean, my series is, as Jeannie said, set near the Okefenokee Swamp in southern Georgia, but there's only one book that actually is set largely in the Okefenokee, and it takes place in late October, because mosquitoes the size of your thumb are not in the Okefenokee in late October, and neither are the deer flies that are about 3/4 the size of the mosquitoes. So, for the Okefenokee, between about early May and the end of September, insect life. But otherwise, any place with water and a view of moonlight. We went out on a night cruise on the Okefenokee, a sunset cruise, and it was beautiful. the sunset on the water and the birds going for the evening. Unfortunately, it was not just the two of us. We had a guide, so that kind of limited the romantic potential, but the setting was very romantic and beautiful. And I think anything that really touches you or touches the character has the potential to be romantic.
Mhm. You know, water, beach, for me, historical settings, usually an area that's a historical area or something nearby that's historical. That's fun to explore, and certainly a place that you can have romance bloom as well.
Well, I
And I
think
try to,
you've both kind of hit on it, is just add water. I mean, it's poolside romance, but you know, it's so often it's just add water.
yeah, absolutely. All those
But I
other
think-
things are an extra. Yeah.
But I think there's a challenge too of if it's someplace that you inherently don't find romantic, to make it romantic. Like the year when we lived in San Diego, we lived out in the desert. There's nothing about the desert that I find romantic. But we lived on this canyon, and when the moonlight would come in and you would light the whole canyon to the moonlight point, right? It was gorgeous, right? And there's like a really romantic scene in Dead Draw that's that view, because I remember that night might be the only romantic night, and there weren't planes overhead, but and there weren't coyotes. But you know, I think there's some challenge in that too.
Well, and that really brings me to my next question, which is if you're using real locations, either like cities or actual locations within the city in your book to further your romance, how do you deal with that? Do you mention where the place is? Do you file the VIN number off and allude to it, but it's not exactly that place? How do you weave your romance in these summer locations? Layla?
I pretty much say what it is, because I generally only write the places that I've been, and try to be accurate. I loved actually the part of San Diego that we lived. I mean, the part of San Diego you see on TV is like a very tiny sliver of San Diego, and it is west of the 5, and it's just the water, and it's too expensive, right? So we lived out in the desert, which is where most of it is, and in North County. And so I had readers who were emailing me going, "This is awesome. We don't ever see this in books because it's a different part of the city." And so that was fun. But I think if you know it and can put those elements of it, like that night when the moon was shining in the canyon, you know, that's how you kind of make it romantic.
Okay, Jeannie?
Well, a lot of my places I do make up. I file the VIN numbers off. File those pesky serial numbers off. Because I've also had the experience of naming places that exist, and then, you know, 2 years after the book comes out, they go belly up. So oftentimes then I personally can control whether it goes belly up or not. But I think Layla's hit on it in the sense of finding those moments or those vistas in the town that you're using, especially if it's a place that you know. Whether it's the view of a odd hotel in Myrtle Beach, or you know, the view over the water at Lake Lure, or you know, the almost every beach seeing the moonrise. I mean, the beach, the lake, wherever, the canyon, those kind of elements that bring that bit of remembered awe back to our hearts, especially when you're in that emotional space of being in love or falling in love or being with somebody. You're so much more sensitive to those nuances of light and shadow and water and moment. And I think it really, we as writers can create that ambiance, and we can do it in a train station, y'all. But it's a lot easier with moonlight and water and a pool. But Layla's living proof that we can do it in a canyon too.
And Jeannie and I have sat next to a hotel in Florida and looked at the scary hotel next door getting renovated, which spawned a bunch of tales.
I know which hotel. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Ariel, how about you?
I think for me, it's kind of a blend of both. because I do tend to write places that I've been as well. But I also kind of follow where my characters might tell me where their setting is. For instance, in my Ava Crowley Vampire Slayer series, I do have some of those books I've been to places in them. But many of those places that I've chosen for the settings in those books I have not been to. So I like to research in part of what I do, because the research for me sometimes is just as much fun as writing the book, because I learn about all these like really cool things. So for instance, when I was writing my series Monsters of Ashwood, I wanted to set my book in an Ashwood place. I wanted it to be in a ghost town. I didn't know it was going to be Ashwood at the time. And I was researching all these different places, and I found Ashwood in Oregon, which was a ghost town. And had a very small population, and I kind of got into like all that and the story with the, you know, the gold rush and things like, and that's why it's set where it is. And then lo and behold, a couple of years later, after the book had come out, and I went to Hot Springs, Virginia, there's an Ashwood, Virginia, right down the road from
there
the
is.
Hot Springs. So, and then I went and I researched that. Not that I would set something there because I already have an Ashwood, but you get the idea. So I kind of just liked, I mean, I have stuff that's set here in my hometown. I kind of like mixing the two together. So a lot of times, if it is a place that I've been, I do try to like incorporate things that I've done. So if I've gone to like a store, I've gone to like a convention or something like that, sometimes I will use that and kind of fashion that how I will, you know, with fiction. But then I also will make things up. Like in my Marriage Pact book, which takes place in my hometown, there's call outs to a lot of local things here, like our Monongahela River, which we call the Mon, or, you know, Alfred Angelo's, which is now closed. You know, it is what it is. But then I also make up little things like where Ian has his comic cafe that is completely made up. There is no comic cafe in Monroeville. You know, so I kind of try to blend the two together.
Nancy, how about you?
It's also a little bit of both for me. In terms of real places, I tend to only use larger cities. My small towns are imaginary and they have whatever I wanted to put in them. And in the cities, I use historical landmarks and street names. When it comes to smaller businesses, I make those up just because it avoids mentioning somebody in a way that they don't like. It avoids the problem that Jeannie mentioned, that the place closes. And it's just easier for me. So I concentrate. I love the research too. So I was really relating to what Ariel was saying. But I like learning about the history of the place and working that into it somehow. But once we get down to street level, what's on that street, aside from historical landmarks, it comes out of my brain. So it's kind of a combination.
Yeah, I write a lot of romantic suspense, really, the paranormal suspense, where they're usually not only falling in love or deepening their relationship, but they're hunting a witch, a vampire, a werewolf, as one does. And I make it a rule never to kill anybody in a real location. I just don't want to be sued. I don't want to have somebody say, oh, you know, cast aspersions on my business or yada, yada.
Damn good rule.
So if somebody is going to die, they're going to die in a made up place. I generally feel like government locations, national monuments, things like that, you can mention by name. They've probably been around for 100 years or more. They're probably still going to be around. And those landmarks, mentioning those landmarks, give people a sense of place, so that if you make up the name of the restaurant or the hotel or the bar or some other place, they're already buying in. They can already see the location in their head. So, you know, adding the made up places, that I think just feeds into the world they're already establishing. Now they're just filling in the places on that street where they may have already been sometime. So I love doing the research to find the real places that I feel comfortable keeping, but it's also fun to tweak and twist some of those places into something unique and original and fictional that I can use to well, besides murdering people, mentioned in ways that like Jeannie said, I don't want to come back and say, oh, well, that restaurant's out of business, so we can't have a date there again. Is there a location that you have found particularly romantic or that you've daydreamed about that you would like to use for a book and maybe haven't yet, Layla?
Oh, that I haven't yet.
Or that, you've daydreamed about and then did?
Probably one for me was, so in my Changeling series, which features Olympic swimmers, they are going through the process, right? First in Colorado Springs for training, then trial, in San Antonio, and then they go to Vienna for their international part of the training before it ended up in Madrid. I guess Madrid would be someplace that I've, daydreamed about going. And so that was a lot of fun to research. They've also continually tried to get the Olympics. So there's all these plans out there of what their venues would look like. So you could actually set it there without it having been there before. So it was kind of a very convenient location for that. But Vienna is somewhere that I studied abroad when I was in college. And so it was really cool, like 15 years later, and it was so romantic to me. Like I love that place, right? To then be able to bring that into a story, to revisit it that way, was just special. And I really loved that. And to see these characters fall in love there, for a place that I found particularly romantic as well.
Okay. Jeannie?
Well, one of these days, I will set a book in Scotland. It's almost never warm enough there for an outdoor pool, but I lived there for a year. Like Layla, I did some of my college abroad, and I wore short sleeves twice in the entire year. So summer reading there is sitting at a cafe outside reading, but not necessarily sweltering or in a pool. But Scotland itself, virtually every corner and turn of every city has something mysterious, something cool, something romantic. You turn a street corner in Edinburgh and you run into 1,000 years of history. You walk up a hill in Glasgow and there's 1,000 years of dead and buried people. You turn your corner in the Highlands anywhere and the view will take your breath away. And so for me, I've written a book set sort of created from the Highlands and from the castles and all that sort of thing. But I have not yet published that one. And I haven't written one that's in our present day Scotland, but just a matter of time. Because as everybody said, the research is so cool. And especially in Scotland. I mean, literally there is history on every corner, even the ones with a modern building on them, there's history there. And so you're like, there's stories everywhere. So yeah, that would be my place to set something super romantic and cool. And of course there will always be bodies on the floor. So, because it's me, but can't do it without blood on the pavement and a romance. So,
Be a romance with that murder. Ariel.
So when I was writing my first series, my Forevermore series, which is part of a larger world, it's connected to my Ava Crowley series and my Hunter Games series. But the Forevermore series books were more the historical romance parts. They were like the background, all the other stuff, and then the Ava Crowley and the Hunter Games books were like more present day. So when I was writing those Forevermore books, I really kind of got to play with the idea of setting it in these places that I deemed romantic, like Italy or Paris or England, because some of the characters, the immortals in that series, they kind of hop around Europe a little bit. They're in one place, they're in something else. So, and then when I was writing my book Monster Spell, very similar, it was set in Ireland. So I do have some Irish heritage that I got to like kind of dive a little bit more into all of that research there and kind of get a little more acquainted with it. And it is definitely one of those places like I have to visit someday, just because while I was researching it, I was like falling in love with it as I researched it. So I would say like Italy, Ireland, England, France, like all those, like that is definitely like in my wheelhouse. I would love to visit some of those places someday and see the romance that I wrote from there from research.
Yep. Nancy?
I would love to visit and set a story in Amsterdam. I don't know all that many people who've been there, but the ones I know who've been there loved it. And it's, look at the pictures, it's beautiful. It's beautiful in the daytime, it's beautiful at night. My husband and I went to a conference in Lisbon quite some years ago. And while he was in the conference, I was kind of walking around the city and doing my very best not to get lost so I could get back to the hotel. And that is a beautiful city with some really cool stuff. And I actually have a plan to use that down the road, but not quite yet, I don't think. And I had another one, but it's gone. So obviously it wasn't too important. So I'll just stop with that.
Well, thanks to a multi-author shared world series that Nancy and Jeannie were also in, I wrote 5 stories about couples who were in love in a castle in England. And that was a lot of fun because I've been to England, I've been to castles, and that was one of my favorite vacations. So it was a lot of fun to put those characters in this other setting and have them explore not only the castle, but you get to see a different side of people when you're on vacation with them and when they're out of their normal setting. So that was a lot of fun. And so those novellas are in one book and as a bonus story in another. I think a romantic setting that I haven't used and that I absolutely love is a cruise ship. We went on a cruise for our honeymoon. Now, my husband unfortunately got a stomach virus and was stuck in the cabin for the first 3 days. So it didn't start off quite as romantic as it ended up, but real things happen. But we've done a number of cruises since then, and I think there's a lot of room to write romance in, even if it's not a singles cruise or some sort of special cruise designed to bring people together. There are just so many opportunities to run into someone, meet new people, and it's a constantly moving location. There's just well, I'm a huge cruise fan, so someday I got to put my guys on a cruise ship and see what happens.
Well, and
Well,
it's so
folks,
fun too, because it is a constantly moving experience, but you actually can't get away from anybody.
this is true. This is true. And there are sometimes, even just as tourists, you start wondering because you keep running into the same people over and over again. It's like, wait, I'm not stalking them. Are they stalking me? Or is it just this is a fairly small ship and there are only so many places to go? Yeah, absolutely. Well, folks, we have almost run through our time. So I want to go around, give everybody a chance to say where we can find you online. And if you have a new, recent, or upcoming book, please tell us about it. Layla?
Yep, I am online at www.laylareyne.com. Have a direct store from that site. And then I'm on all the socials at Layla Reyne. My most recent release was Best Play, which was the last book in the Perfect Play series. This is the one that's set in San Diego. And then the new Agents Irish and Whiskey book comes out in August. It's called Angel Share, and that one is set in LA.
Nice. Jeannie?
My most recent release is in Mercedes Lackey's anthology, Anything with Nothing. And I will be in the next Mercedes Lackey anthology in the fall, but I also will have the other series that Nancy and I write together is the Outcast Station series that we write the Kingdom Castle series in which Gail is, but we also write the Outcast Station series, which is the space adventure. And I should have a book coming out in the fall. And you can find me at jeanneadams.com and most of the socials and here on Continual.
Okay. Ariel?
Oop.
You're muted. You're muted.
Lovely.
That's okay.
You can find me at ariel-dawn.com. I did have a couple releases just this past week. So I released Ink and Honey with B. Murray, and I also released Song of Silence, which is a great beach read because it takes place in nowhere, North Carolina, and there's waterfalls and woods and all kinds of fun stuff. And I wrote that with AJ Mulliken. And I am also going to be at Romanticon this weekend in Connecticut. So up in Trumbull, if any of y'all are up that way, come say hey.
Nice. Nancy?
My website is nancynorthcott.com. All my social media connections are there. My next release will be The Speaker for All, which is an Outcast Station book. Jeannie and I are writing solo books. We've written a couple of things together, but our next releases are solo complete novels. And that'll be out this fall. My romance release schedule is kind of in flux. So I just like to mention my one summer hometown romance that has a lakeside beach in it, which is called Worth the Wait. And it's about a spy who's home on leave and the deputy sheriff that for various reasons he never got together with before.
Okay.
Love that story.
Thanks, Jean.
Well, 4 out of the 5 of my Canham Castle novellas, different partners, all different couples, all at the same castle, got released as Castle Magic. Silent Partner is the newest Fox Hollow Zodiac book, and that is all shifters in a small town in the Adirondacks that is a haven for misfit shifters and psychics. And then Tapestry just came out in my Deadly Curiosities series. And while that's usually much more urban fantasy than romance, there is a male-male couple that has been a constant throughout the 5 books leading up to this. And they finally get married, hijinks ensue. And there's a bonus novella of their honeymoon story at Canham Castle in the back. So lots of romance, even though it's not usually a romantic series. Well, folks, thank you so much for being with us. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There will be more romance coming up on Continual, so we'll see you online.